Welcome to the Cyber Insights Podcast, brought to you by the ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut. And our guest today is Mr. Leighton Johnson, the founder and CTO of ISFMT. And we're going to be talking with Leighton about the current state of the CMMC program. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Cyber Insights Podcast. In today's episode, we'll examine the current state of something known as the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, also known as the CMMC. We're going to try to delve into its evolution, some of its implementation hurdles, and its critical role in protecting the defense industrial base. If you haven't heard about the CMMC, now is your time to start to learn about it because it has the potential and expectation that it's going to significantly impact the Department of Defense networks, and there's even talk about it maybe moving into other federal agencies beyond DoD. Our guest today is Mr. Leighton Johnson, who's a veteran cybersecurity architect, an author, and the founder of ISFMT with more than 4 decades of expertise across securing systems, digital forensics, and national security frameworks. I'm also joined by Mr. Altan Bulut. Altan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Jim. It's going to be another super interesting episode, and super excited to dive deep.
Absolutely. And Leighton, we want to both welcome you to the
Uh,
podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here, Jim. Glad to be here, Alton.
Awesome. So, what we all generally like to do, Leighton, is we like to provide just a little bit of background on the guest. I kind of introduced and
Sure.
provided some context. But can you talk a little bit about your distinguished path from satellite cybersecurity to where you founded the ISFMT and how you're focused on training, assessment, and even advancing areas of cyber consulting?
Well, initially I started towards the end of the Vietnam War in satellite communications, back when there was only 130 people in the entire world that were in satellite communications in the military, so everybody knew everybody, and started off that way. Then I moved forward, supporting the military, Army, Air Force, etc., doing things in satellite communications, both for the military as well as for the intelligence community for about 10 additional years there. Then I started in on, as that part of that time while I was in the intelligence community, I moved into the beginning of what we call cybersecurity. Now we call cybersecurity. Back then, and we just called it computer security. Those types of things. And basically, I've been doing that part of it for pretty much ever since. So we're talking the mid 1980s through today, as far as that goes with all of that effort. So I've seen pretty much all of it, as you can well imagine, being around this for close to 40 years and just the security side of this scenario. Working with all organizations, commercial, federal, contractor, international, all sorts of organizations. I've audited as part of it. I picked up audit certifications as part of this. I've audited 3 of the top 10 banks in the world over the last 15 years. Things like that, as far as those go. So I was one of the original people that came together with CMMC back when it started in 2020, which is where my endeavors are at the particular point.
Understood. Hey, I real quickly, just to kind of provide some
Hmm.
context. Can we talk a little bit about your role in standards body? I know before we jumped
Sure.
on the call, you were talking about IEEE, and
Yep.
we don't want to necessarily delve into zero trust, but I know you have you're
Yeah.
participating just to provide
Sure.
context.
All right. First time I've been a member of IEEE for 30 years, thereabouts. But initially I had gotten asked to participate in a standards body with the Cloud Security Alliance when it first started back in 2009, 2010, 2011 timeframe. in putting together standards for protocol exchanging of information among cloud providers worldwide, as far as given the Cloud Security Alliance mechanisms. And so I helped put together those initial incident response protocols way back when. Of course, it's evolved multiple times since then, but that part of that. And so I sort of got interested in doing some standards work. And about 18 months ago, one of the people who knew my background in IEEE, I'm a member of 5 different IEEE groups, asked me if I'd be interested in helping put together this process for zero trust. Having worked in zero trust for several years with these things, I said, sure, I could certainly assist in that. And so for the last 18 months or so, we've been putting together under IEEE's standards organization, IEEE SA, a zero trust standard that will be international, and it will be focused on the basic domains and pillars of zero trust as a commonality, and getting away from people who want to have only one way, understanding we're looking at this from a big picture standpoint. And so we're looking at, well, these are the foundational parts. We're not going to get into, you got to have this type of authentication or that type of authentication. It's that you got to have smart authentication, period, whatever it might be, that type of thing.
Understood.
And we're close to the finish line with this. So we're getting ready to publish it to the IEEE standards group. And once that happens, then it'll come out as a standard somewhere late summer, early fall sometime.
Awesome. So I think that really kind of rounds out your background and provides our audience a good look into your level of authority when it comes to programs in the cyberspace, and obviously from a standards perspective. Obviously, the gist of today's show is really focused on the CMMC. I thought maybe, can we have you first, maybe 30-second elevator speech? What is the CMMC program? And then maybe after you've quickly defined it for our audience, maybe kind of explain where it's kind of at from a maturity perspective,
Sure.
not necessarily the maturity levels, but just from an
Right.
overall program perspective.
Sure. Okay. Late 2015 through 2020, roughly, lots of problems with supply chain risk for DoD. Information is obviously getting to our adversaries. They were copying things from data that they had retrieved from a variety of sources, vendors, government, et cetera, et cetera. Basically came out to being that DoD had a supply chain problem, and their supply chain problem was costing them in the neighborhood of $600 billion a year.
Wow.
Way too much money. And so the supply chain issue was that the data was getting stolen and getting into the hands of our various adversaries around the world.
Got it.
And so DoD put together a program called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Mechanism to evaluate the supply chain, i.e. every single DoD contractor out there, all 300,000 of them, around how good were they actually protecting the data that they were given by DoD. And this was going to be how good were they protecting it at their location, not a DoD location, at their location. And because that's where it was determined to be the weakest in its management in general. And this is a general, this was everybody. It wasn't one particular one or one group or one area. It was across the board. And so they came up with this program using academics from Johns Hopkins APL and Carnegie Mellon to help design the CMMC in the first place when they put it together. And so they came up with these efforts, and it's basically It's an evaluation program done on how good is the security at these defense contractor locations, wherever they may be. And that is true. It's wherever they may be. Understanding that 15% of DoD supply chain is overseas, is foreign companies. So that's part of this too.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Uh-huh.
And so it's everywhere. And so they put together this. It's gone through one program review on a change of administration. There was one program review. It's still being maintained, still updated, still moving forward. We're at version 2.0 right now. We're halfway through the regulatory cycle. The first part of the regulatory cycle was complete, done, and went into effect the 16th of December last year. The second part of the regulatory cycle is out for its final review right now. And so once that happens, we'll be on our 60-day timer for that, just like we were on the other one. And that's when it goes into contracts. And that's once it goes into contracts, then every defense contractor will have to abide by these efforts because it will be listed in the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement for all defense contracts.
Understood. Understood. So great overview. Thanks for that. I think our audience will appreciate that. Can you also maybe expand upon some of the level? I know there's like different levels and
Oh, yeah.
self-attestation and how this all kind of dovetails and aligns with some of the guidance from NIST, specifically
Sure,
800
sure. Okay, let's look at this. CMMC itself, CMMC 2.0 is based on 3 levels of evaluation and how good is the security at the location. Level 1 takes the standard Federal Acquisition Regulation stipulations for cybersecurity, of which there are 15 that have been in the Federal Acquisition Regulation since 2015. Those 15, I should say, and stipulates that those are required for all defense contractors too.
Okay.
Which makes sense because they're part of the Federal Acquisition Regulation in the first place. So that's not new. But now the requirement under CMMC is that the defense contractor has to attest to that they're doing all 15 things.
Okay.
And they have to do that in writing
Okay.
to Department of Defense.
Okay.
Okay. That's level 1.
Level 1.
They do this self-attestation, 15 controls. That's it. Then comes the main area, which is level 2.
Okay.
Now, CMMC level 2 controls are based upon what NARA did back in 2014
Okay.
as an output for requirements around what was defined as the new method of dealing with unclassified but sensitive information called CUI, or Controlled Unclassified Information. At that point, when that executive order came out in 2014 or 2013, they combined SBU data, FOUO data, and sensitive information and put them all under the moniker of CUI.
Okay.
They made the National Archives the responsible executive agent for this, NARA, and NARA created the CUI repository.
Okay.
That CUI repository defines a series of different federal types of information that are sensitive but not classified.
Got it.
Okay. They're unclassified, but they're sensitive privacy information, healthcare information, etc. Things like that. Nuclear information for nuclear power plants, stuff like that. Well, so it includes infrastructure, etc., that type of thing. Well, under Department of Defense, there are 5 different types of this CUI. Okay.
Okay.
They generally call it control defense information, or CDI, but it's broken out into 5 types of different types of things. And then, of course, there's also privacy information and healthcare information that DoD uses all the time, because, you know, pretty much every installation has a hospital of some sort. So they got healthcare information, etc., that type of thing. That took then NIST, based on that executive order, created a subset of the main security requirements for federal agencies.
Okay.
And assigned this to that specific type of information called CUI for everybody, non-federal organizations that do these efforts. That document that does that is known as Special Publication 800-171. So it's basically a subset, a dramatic subset. When I mean dramatic, I mean we went from 1,100 controls in 853 down to 110, 800-171. So there's a major reduction of what's needed for these non-federal organizations.
Okay.
All right, whether they be schools, whether they be research organizations, whether they be defense contractors, whether they be training organizations, whatever it might be, if they're utilizing federal CUI for DoD, they have to follow this criteria under level 2.
Okay.
That's what level 2 is.
Okay. Level 3?
Now, level 3 is for those special defense contractors, and they know who they are, who are the big targets, basically.
Yeah.
And they have specialized mechanisms they have to protect, because they're going to be the ones who are the targets of special attacks, advanced persistent threat attacks, those types of things, as far as those efforts. And there's extra controls that come from 800-172 out of 853 that get added to that. And it's only for that subset of the subset. And that particular subset at level 3 is estimated to be less than 1% of defense contract.
Got it.
So
those are your 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3.
Level 3. That's
okay.
It.
So that's a great overview. Thank you, Leighton. I'm sure our audience will appreciate it. You succinctly kind of broke it down as to, you know, who they are and the kind of information and the requirements. Can you also for a moment talk about kind of the broader ecosystem? I know there are assessment organizations, there's the Cyber AB. Can we just kind of paint that picture as well too, just so that our audience has a better understanding of who the players are besides DoD?
Okay. Well, DoD, when they put this together in 2020, coming out of the acquisition side of DoD, clearly decided, since they're used to dealing with contracts and all those types of things, because it was the acquisition part of DoD that was coming up with this idea, put together this construct such that in order to be able to assess and evaluate what they needed to do from the defense contractor perspective, they needed to do it on a scale that they themselves could not handle. Because we're talking 300,000 contract organizations.
Sure.
And they're doing assessments anyway of federal agencies, just their own assessments. I mean, they have an assessment organization, okay, which is the DIPCAC, as they talk about it, which is the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment organization that does the evaluations. Okay, what goes under contracts? Are they meeting the contractual requirements, etc.? So they're doing it, but there's no way that they could handle this incredible volume of contract organization. So they came up with the idea to create a third-party organization, nonprofit organization, to handle the assessment side of the house. Well, it was originally called the CMMC accreditation body, or CMMC AB, and it's evolved over the 5 years since then to be calling the Cyber AB. Okay, that's what that is that's the third party nonprofit organization run under standard IRS 501c6 rules, etc., that type of thing, to do assessments for these organizations on behalf of DoD using DoD criteria, and therefore having people who are trained in this DoD criteria being able to do the assessments.
Understood.
And so they created a ecosystem of assessing organizations, of which there's approximately 70 currently accredited. Created CMMC professionals and created CMMC assessors as part of these processes. But the general guiding documentation for all of that comes from DoD. So the assessment guide, the scoping guides, the models, the explanation of the controls are all DoD documents, not CyberAB documents, not some third party. No, they're all DoD documents issued by DoD, following the normal process that they go through as far as that goes. And so they created the CyberAB, then created training organizations and publishing organizations who would take that DoD documentation and make it a little less technical, a little bit easier to understand, so that the people who had to implement this, as well as the people who had to assess for this, could do both jobs.
Understood.
And that's where that all came from.
Got it. So we've got 3 PAOs, which are third-party assessment organizations. You've got CyberAB, and then you've got DoD, and then of course all the 300,000 contractors.
Contractors, right?
Awesome.
Of which I will tell you, level 1 is primarily going to be considered to have the most.
Okay.
Contract organizations. Level 2, they're estimating somewhere between 75 and 100,000.
Okay.
I'm thinking closer to 100,000. They're thinking closer to 75,000. We'll actually see how it actually comes out once we go through this process. I don't know. But everybody has to be a level 1. So that's just the foundation. So everybody's going to have to do a self-assessment to start with, no matter what. So that's part of the reason why CyberAB put together these understanding documents for everybody to understand, because everybody's going to have to do at least level 1. All defense contract.
Understood.
Doesn't matter if it's the 6-person CNC shop down the street to Lockheed Martin, which is the biggest defense contractor. They all going to have to do it.
Sure. So I think Altan had a question. I was going to turn it over to him.
Yeah, sure.
Altan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to get a little bit more detail on the process for determining like anything beyond level 1. Like, how do we ensure that there's not too much ambiguity in terms of like what is sensitive data that falls under the level 2, and how do we determine if an organization is a significant target of APTs, or like is it reasonably like straightforward in the real world to determine and set out those, like clearly define those boundaries? Like would an organization be able to like dispute some of the expectations either from the DoD or any other assessor in terms of what they need to do, what they need to provide?
Okay, well, let me let you know how this works. Since this was originally an acquisition construct back in 2020, the determining factor has been made by DoD that the one who determines if the contract is going to be at level 1, which is called Federal Contract Information, or FCI, or level 2, which is called the CUI, is the contracting officer, the federal employee for DoD who issues the contract and signs it. They are the ones who make that determination. Is there a method by which that will be disputed? No, because it's a contract. And so they're doing it because of what's in the contract. Okay. Now, there will probably be discussions before a contract is signed, but once the contract's signed, it's the contracting officer's responsibility to say, this is CUI, or this is FCI, or whatever it might be, or this is unclassified. One of the three. Okay. Now, DoD will also make the choice if it's going to go to level 3. And for the most part, that's going to be very clear to both DoD and the organizations who have that, because they're already experiencing some of that issue for the most part. If a company is not experiencing that issue up front, the odds are they're probably not going to be level 3, but they may already have been talking to the DoD, and DoD may have already said, you're probably going to be level 3 when it comes out. Now, the level 3 will not be actually put into place for at least a year or so after level 2 starts. That's what their current estimated timeframes are.
So does that involve the modification of the contract or moving
No,
them up to the levels?
it's updating the contract.
Okay. So you mentioned,
Now, let's be
okay,
realistic. Their window is 3 years. Their window for 3 years means it's every single contract will be either renewed or let new in that 3-year window across the board for all of DoD. Okay.
mhm,
Somewhere in that window, 3-year window, there's going to be a new piece of paper that gets signed.
mhm.
That's where that CMMC is going to come in. Now, the biggest kicker in all of this for the defense contractors is they need to be there at the appropriate level for that contract on the day of the contract award, not to bid it when it's awarded. They could take, and now that may take 6 months. The bigger contracts I've certainly seen. I mean, I worked for Lockheed for a while, and we worked on contracts that took 2 years before they got awarded. That type of thing.
Leighton, does that requirement also then apply to all of the subcontractors as well too, or just the prime?
It's flow down.
Okay,
There is a flow down totally involved in that. If the subcontractors are going to have CUI data, that CUI requirement fits on the subcontractors too.
I see. I see.
That's why I said all 300,000.
Do you envision that, like, if primes want to really work with certain subs and they haven't gotten their certification from the Cyber AB or the 3PAO, that, there might be scoping issues or scoping opportunities where the prime may not necessarily, um, from the flow down perspective, incorporate certain areas of the contract for that sub until they can get their certification? I'm just trying to think
Certainly,
logistically.
yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
that's going to be totally up to the prime.
Is it
I mean,
okay?
the prime is the management all flow down.
Got
I
it.
mean, as part of the prime, one of the things that's going to be in their contract is CUI flow down.
Got it.
Okay. So if Lockheed or Boeing or Northrop or Raytheon or any of these people that's out there that's got 50, 60, 80, 100, 200 contractors, subcontractors on a particular contract, it's going to be totally up to them to manage that.
I see.
All right. But DoD is the one who's going to enforce it.
Understood. Understood.
And because every contractor has to file the paperwork with DoD, and that's where that comes in.
I also wanted to follow up on the
Sure.
past issues that you mentioned. The company must
Sure.
be either dealing with issues or maybe like high risk. Is that tied to some sort of like past incidents or
Maybe not.
rarely? Hmm,
It may not be.
hmm,
Does DoD track that? Yes, they do. Of course they do. I mean, there's been a requirement that all federal contractors report all incidents within 72 hours under
hmm.
the FAR regulation since 2015 to U.S. CERT.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there is this requirement that's been there. We're coming on 10 years now. So it is part of it. Yes.
So if a given attack happens and DoD is
Hmm.
notified during the existing
Hmm.
contract that specifies
Hmm.
it's at level 2 right now, is there a process that would trigger reassessment to maybe expedite moving up to level 3 based on the newly uncovered information or realization that it is indeed a target?
Um, I don't know how DoD is planning on doing that. They're not really made that public information on how they
Mhm.
plan on doing that kind of thing. Do they review? Yes. Do they go in and assess? Yes. They do that now. I mean,
Hmm.
DIBCAC does that now. That's nothing new. They've been doing that for the last 6, 7 years. So
Hmm.
that's not a new process. They haven't specified anything in direct relation to CMMC doing a trigger because this is the whole incident response mechanism. It's not necessarily always directly related to CUI.
Hey, Leighton, on that point, so, a lot of these contracts that are awarded are
Mm-hmm.
usually awarded over a 5-year period. Well,
Mm-hmm.
with an initial year and then option years.
Yep.
Have you heard, and if the answer is DoD hasn't figured that out yet as well, but is there a possibility that the levels could change from option year to option year, either up or down? Has there been any discussion about, I think that's kind of what Alton's kind of alluding to, or as I'm
Yeah.
envisioning, hey, our option year is up. We were level 2 previously. We've now realized the information that we're dealing with really isn't CUI. We want to downgrade the requirements of this contract to level 1. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and any
Yeah,
any
I
insight into that?
understand, and I haven't seen any insight. I know it would be DoD who does it. It would not be the contractor. It wouldn't be a request of the contractor. It's purely going to be DoD and DoD's hands because that's the way it's laid out. But I haven't heard anything about year to year switching,
Okay,
um, especially with subs involved. I haven't heard
sure.
any of that. That's all prime. It's the CO talking to the contracting officer talking to the prime for the most part is where that would come into play. Um, I don't believe that they've actually published anything about
Okay, okay, just curious. Hey,
that.
let me ask you another question. So, so organizations out there are probably looking at this program and
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, hey, we're using a lot of risk management practices. We're already
Yep.
following the CSF from this or
Yep.
ISO 27001,
Yep.
27002. How do the, what kind of guidance would you give organizations on how they reconcile these new requirements within CMMC with some of the things they might already be doing today? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Every one of these frameworks has pieces that are the same. Let's start from there.
Sure,
I've
sure.
I've taught them all. I've done work on all of them. I've assessed them all over the last 40 years. They all have pieces that are common. Okay. Interestingly enough, the process for doing risk assessment that's defined by NIST and SP 830, Guide to Conducting Risk Assessment, is identical to what's in ISO 27005, which is identical to the process that's in the cybersecurity framework, which is identical to the process that's in the 3 pillars that AICPA does for SOC 2. So they're all the same one. It's the best practice. And so that type of thing, you will find there are pieces that translate. Is it all encompassing? No. I mean, let's be realistic. The risk management framework, as an example, that NIST has produced over the last 20 years, since 2005, when 853 came out the first time, 20 years ago, 2005, is by far and away the most extensive area for security controls that's out there. Okay, NIST, ISO 27001, 2022 version only has 97 controls. 853 Rev 5 has 1100. Okay, you can tell immediately there's a huge difference. All right, we have to look at the cybersecurity framework. They just now added under 2.0 a governance area. They
Yep.
didn't have
Yep.
that before.
Yep.
Okay. And that moved some of the other controls, and they added some new in there as part of that too. But still, we're only, 120, 130, somewhere in there. We're still not anywhere close to what this is. So 800-171 itself, oh, by the way, has also gone through a revision since CMMC started. You'll find that out. Hey, CMMC 2.0, sometime next year, probably Q3, maybe Q4 of 2026, we're going to go to CMMC 3.0. Why? Because 800-171 is now at Rev 3. All right. Not Rev 2, which
Understood.
is what CMMC was built on, was Rev
Got
2.
it. Got it.
So it's going to get upgraded too. And
Yep.
we're talking there's more controls there. So yeah, there are commonalities, absolutely, but nothing is exclusively what is in the other. Okay. So you'll find lots of areas that are different too.
Awesome. Awesome. I think Altan was going to ask you another question about that, or
Yes, sir.
maybe build upon it.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back a little bit to transition from 1.0 to 2.0. So what were some of the biggest challenges that led to the new version being developed and introduced, like maybe from the levels or the requirements?
The biggest problem was figuring out how to do a measurement of maturity for defense contractors. They dropped the measurement of maturity constructs. Okay. When they went from 1.0 to 2.0. If you remember when it originally came out, it had 5 levels. And there were 3 levels that were involved in that. You had level 1, then you had 2 and 3, and then you have 4 and 5, as far as that goes, for what was required. And each one was a level of maturity. Well, their biggest problem was, how do you actually gauge that? And we didn't have, nor did we have the ability to have that much. So when they did their program review, and I want to say 2021, which was like 10 months long, 2021, when they came out with 2.0, they dropped the maturity requirement. All right, that level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 scenario of gauging how good were they doing their practices, that type of thing.
So it shifted more to the criticality of the data they handle,
yes,
and then
focus
stringency
much
of the
more on the
controls.
data. Yes,
Okay.
data and the controls that manage and deal with the data. And that's what really they wanted to. The 110 were still relatively the same coming out of 800-171. But, that type of thing. But they're focused specifically on confidentiality, 90% on confidentiality and 10% on integrity. And I will tell you right now, one of the biggest changes that will happen is they are going to finally get around to doing availability when they get to 3.0. They've already made that stipulation. If you look at 800-171 Rev 3, it has availability.
And for the assessment requirement, from 1.0 to 2.0, I believe it was strictly required by third-party certification providers. Is that correct? And then with the newer edition, there are a lot of provisions to allowances for self-assessments for level 1 and
that's a
level 2.
delusion.
No?
I'll be honest to you. That's a delusion.
Hmm.
Level 1, yes. Level 2, I have heard nobody get it yet. For level 2 self-assessment.
Not in real life.
Everyone, not in real life.
Okay.
What's happened so far is level 2 is third-party assessment. Okay. I'll be honest. All right. Level 1, yeah, self-assessment all day long. That's easy. All right. No question about it. But this level 2 self-assessment, yes, it says that. Yes, you have the bifurcation of being able to do that, but I have yet to see a contracting officer sign anything saying they could do it self-assessment
Hmm.
for
Understood.
level 2.
Understood. Okay, hey Leighton, so great discussion about kind of where things are at today.
Sure.
Let's look into the future. Let's talk a little bit
Sure.
about where things are headed, right?
Okay.
So, you talked, there were a couple rules that were going through, or started on December of last year and one that's
Yep.
coming. With
Yep.
that final rule that's anticipated, that's coming,
Yep.
what do you think defense contractors should expect next from the DoD and CMMC in a broader context?
When that rule is signed, the ability to put CMMC requirements into a new contract is now legal. Period. They can do it instantly if they want to. They probably won't. They'll probably do it gradually over, a 2-year period or 3-year period, whatever. But the way it's written and the way it's coming out, when Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations is approved, is when CMMC goes into defense contracts.
So does that only then apply to new contracts from that point forward, or
Yes.
will they backport any of it into existing
They are not
contracts?
backporting any.
Okay,
They are only doing new and recompetes.
I see.
That's it. From that day forward.
I see.
So the timer for the 3-year window or 4-year window, whatever their window is that they got these days, is that. And that's where that comes into play.
If you had to look into your crystal ball, when would you anticipate that this is going to be ratified or finalized?
End of summer.
End of summer? Okay.
And so I would say the 60-day federal requirement for timing is going to kick in then. So I'm probably, the best guess is the first of the fiscal year, 2025, 2026 fiscal year, I should say. And I would expect it to take that mechanism somewhere around there. It may be earlier, depends on how fast this final mechanism is. It's got to go through a 60-day timer no matter what. And so once OIRA says yes, then the 60-day timer starts.
And is anything possibly going to stop that 60 days from?
Sure. I mean, OIRA stopped the last one by 2 years.
Okay.
So the answer is certainly, of course.
It could.
I mean, it's their choice. All right. They're setting the standards for the federal government. They're part of OMB anyway. That's where OIRA sits. So they have the right to say that they're in charge of the management of the federal agencies. So yeah, they can do that.
Got it.
So hey, yeah, sure.
So let's talk about, I know you're involved in the audit space and do a lot of the assessment. How do you envision, technologies, new emerging technologies like artificial intelligence playing in this space? I mean, I could envision a lot of these assessment organizations going, well, we're just going to use AI to do everything. Has there been any guidance from DoD or from the Cyber AB on what's acceptable versus unacceptable, or what are your thoughts?
At this particular point, there really hasn't been a lot of guidance. They've been sort of waiting for the international audit organizations to put together guidance on how to review AI technology-wise. I mean, I know ISACA is working on that. I know AICPA is working on that. I myself am working on the joint venture between IIA and ISACA on how to audit AI, that type of thing, from both a audit manager perspective as well as a security manager perspective, as far as those efforts go. I think they've been sort of waiting for that to get done so that, I mean, it's sort of the same thing when you look at what happened with the information coming out post Enron. And it took 2.5 years before we actually got a sense of what was the SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3 going to give us, which was the result of Enron. I mean, that's where that came from, was, and that was, like 2.5 years, or, late 1998 to early 2001 when a SOC actually came out. that type of thing from AICPA and that type of thing. So I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen with that. Now, can we afford to wait? No. AI is moving way too fast for people to understand. We got 72% of the people doing AI who have absolutely no clue on how it works.
Sure,
You know,
sure,
just in general. We have a vast majority of them not understanding that it's all in the data. And that's what CMMC is about, is
sure,
protecting the data.
sure.
And AI is all about how do you manage the data, because that's what we use to train the AI. That's what you use to search the AI. All that is the data sets, you know. So there's all sorts of things that could cause shifting of what's going on about what controls are worth it and which ones aren't. The thing I see happening right now that's a major area that we always got to pay attention to, Jim, is DoD is moving away from RMF. I
Mm,
mean, let's pay attention to that. Okay. In the beginning of May, DoD, Katie Arrington came out making statements and so forth. So did the Army CIO, that they're moving away from RMF and going to cyber posture scenarios and not working with that type of control mechanisms because they feel it gives them better response time. It's
interesting.
taking way too long, according to them, even in today's world of continuous monitoring, going to continuous ATOs. I mean, that's where that came from, was the push for continuous ATOs, and they're still seeing it as not answering fast enough.
I see.
And, that type of thing. I mean, the Navy has a new program, the Army has a new program. They're both working those ways. DoD has a new program in software, using the whole SSDF scenario under 800-218. Okay, that type of thing for SBOMs and all the rest of that. And that's all external to RMF. Okay, because what? They're doing everything. Infrastructure as code, software as code, all the rest of that, which is all SBOM based,
Hmm.
that
Interesting.
type of thing for its security. So there's no telling. There's lots of changes coming.
So talk about, I know you said in our
Mm-hmm.
pre-call or before we jumped on, started
Mm-hmm.
the podcast, you talked about how you're working with the IEEE and Zero
Yeah,
Trust.
right.
How do you figure that's going to fit within the CMMC? I know a lot of organizations out there, a lot of contractors, at least the bigger boys, have been, analyzing Zero Trust and started to incorporate it from a risk perspective. Is that a factor, do you think?
That DoD said every organization in DoD has to have zero trust by the end of 2027.
Okay.
They made a blanket DoD requirement
Okay.
for everybody that supports DoD mechanisms must be zero trust by 2020, the end of 2027. That's their deadline.
So they want even the
And
contractors to follow that as well, too, is what you're saying.
I'm just saying everybody.
Okay. 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 Well, then,
They contract officers interpret that their way, but you know, that's all I can say is whatever they happen to say that way. But DoD said that all DoD activities and networks that will be zero trust by the end of 2027.
hmm.
Period.
Hopefully it won't be like their mandate to move to IP version 6 by 2008 or
I
whatever it
know, I
was.
know. I remember that one too. But I also see there's lots of organizations who are doing that.
Sure.
And
100%.
there's a
100%.
ton of organizations that are out there supporting DoD and its endeavors to get all these various activities on a zero trust enabled backbone network. I mean, networks, that's one part of the five pillars. So we certainly got to do it. We got FICAM as another part of the five pillars of zero trust. So this is not new. All right. This has certainly been there, that type of thing. So they're working their way at it.
Alton?
But I wanted to ask about the cost of compliance for especially small and medium-sized contractors. Do you see them
Great
in the
topic.
medium to long run getting better at managing those, or do you see the evolution of the framework allowing them to optimize that balance in terms of
At this point,
yeah.
their view is you should have been doing this all along since 2015 because that's when it went into federal acquisition regulations. And here
Mm,
it is 10 years later and you still don't have it.
mm,
That cost is your problem. And that's exactly, unfortunately, most of the way that I've seen contract officers talk about that
mm,
is this is because you've had 7 years to get ready for this.
mm,
What do you mean you got a cost problem today? You've got 7 years of contract information that you built in. Is it all wrong? Are you lying? Oh, wait
mm,
a minute. That's against the law to lie to the federal government. Maybe you shouldn't tell us that you're doing that. And please understand, DOD with False Claims Act filings has never lost, ever. I've never seen them lose a False Claims Act filing in 10 years.
But
So,
what if they're a very recently established company, like uh, newer than 7 years, like in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe they're just
mhm.
getting
They're
up and
just getting
running?
up and ready. They're just
Yeah,
going to say this is part of doing business in this space.
yeah,
I mean, that's honestly what I've seen them actually say is this is part of doing business with DOD. You want to have a DOD contract, this
yeah.
is part of doing that business. So you
So,
need to
yeah,
prepare for that. You need to understand that you got to have firewalls, you got to have boundaries, you got to check identity identification mechanisms at every boundary, etc.
yeah,
That's part of what they're saying is the cost of doing business with DoD. Is that somewhat hard? Probably. But with what's been stolen, I don't blame them. Okay. Honestly, they've literally stole our intellectual property all over the world on massive scales. And so, they're saying, hey, wait a minute. This is important to the national security of the United States. Pay attention.
mhm,
Okay. That type of thing. And that's part of it. 10-person artificial intelligence company. They got algorithms that nobody in the world has except them
mhm,
and their DoD customer. Are they going to have to meet the criteria for this? Probably. Are they going to have to meet the level 3 criteria? I would expect so because they'll be a target.
mhm,
Absolutely. They'll have advanced persistent threat targeting coming from nation states all over. Not just one, but all over because they got advances that nobody else has. So, of course, they're going to have to protect their stuff very closely. Are they going to be wheeling and dealing like Silicon Valley? Probably not. Okay. I've been there, I've seen it. Probably not that way because they are targeted. And because in today's world, we've seen so much incredible volumes of costing around AI and algorithms and startups and all the rest of it that everybody's sort of like being very, very careful about that to start with, that type of thing.
Hey, Leighton, we're running low on time. I did want to ask you one final follow-up
Sure,
question about the
sure,
future.
sure.
I've been going to a number of conferences, and one of the kind of the niche areas that I've been seeing start to kind of come about or talk about is the area of space. And
Yes.
with satellites and all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
other how they're obviously they need to be secured as well too. I
Yep.
know that you'd be kind of uniquely positioned to kind of ask about this and wanted to know, what is, the intersection of space-based cybersecurity and CMMC in terms of alignment? Obviously, the DoD's involved in a whole bunch of communications. Any thoughts on how is CMMC going to be applied to those kinds of contractors as well too, or those kinds of organizations?
For the DoD satellites for the intelligence community satellites, the answer is probably yes.
Okay.
Now, mind you, let's stop and think about it. 2019, we had 950 satellites that were out there. Today, we have 7,600.
Wow.
Hello, SpaceX. That's what SpaceX did.
Yeah.
Okay. They launched 6,000 satellites in the last 5 years. Okay. That type of thing. So we have to stop and think about it. Those are all commercial. Now we have to look at what is DoD doing? What is the intelligence community doing? Because they're the ones who run our national defense satellite stuff. You know, all of those organizations as part of that effort. I would expect CMMC is going to be required on DoD deployed platforms. Yeah.
Okay. Understood.
And I would expect that to be whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, whoever.
All right. Awesome. Only a couple minutes left. I did want to ask you a question for small businesses, right? So what kind of practical steps could you provide to, the smaller organizations out there that are trying to, prepare for CMMC assessments? Any kind of best practice or any kind of guidance you
Couple
can
of
think of?
basic areas. If you got sensitive information, if you have CUI information, you need to have the US government standard encryption. Period. There's
Okay.
no argument. If you're not at FIPS 140 level 2-2 level encryption, you will not pass CMMC assessment. Period. Point blank. You will not pass. They make no exception for that. Number one. Number two, everybody needs some identity. No shared identities. Let's be real clear about that too. That's part of that zero trust. That's part of the management mechanism. Even when we get into shared identities around database administration and system administrators, we got to be careful about the shared identities there. Okay, so the less sharing of accounts, the better. Ideally, nobody has a shared account. Okay, ideally.
Okay.
Number three, manage access to your building. I actually had someone come to a building that was getting a level 1 assessment, and he could walk in the front door, and never got asked who he was, what was he doing there, and he walked down the hallway to an office before someone stopped him and said, "Who are you?" Literally.
Okay.
So watch your physical security too. Things walk in people's pockets.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Those are 3 quickies
Okay.
right off the top of my head.
Awesome. All right, Leighton. Well, that's going to do it for us today. We want to thank you for coming on the show and
Sure.
participating with us.
I'm happy to. Anytime you want, just give me a call.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode of Cyber Insights. Quick heartfelt thank you to Mr. Leighton Johnson for joining us and delivering such a rich field-tested perspective on the current state and hopefully planned future state of the CMMC program. From practical guidance for small contractors to kind of understanding the big pictures as it relates to, artificial intelligence, space, and maybe even a little bit in terms of zero trust. Leighton's insight has helped demystify one of the most critical compliance frameworks that's today emerging within the defense sector. Again, Leighton, we want to thank you. And for our listeners, don't forget to visit the ISACA-GWDC, the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter of ISACA's online website at www.isaca-gwdc.org. There you'll find upcoming events, professional development opportunities, certification resources, and more ways to connect with fellow cybersecurity risk governance, privacy professionals in the National Capital Region and beyond. Until then, stay secure and keep leading from the front lines of cyber defense. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you next time.